إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Indeed, all praise is due to Allah. We praise Him, seek His aid and ask His forgiveness. We seek refuge in Allah from the evils of ourselves and from the evils of our actions. Whomsoever Allah guides, none can misguide. Whomsoever Allah misguides, none can guide. I bear witness that there is none worthy of worship except for Allah, alone have no partner. And I bear witness that Muhammad is a slave and His messenger. Can you start the person? Take the echo, please. Before I start, I would like just to remind the brothers that the Prophet ﷺ, he taught the companions the way that to sit for a class or a circle. And that is to get as close as possible, leaving no gaps. For those who are leaving gaps, it is not from the Sunnah. So the companions had taken that instruction from the Prophet of Allah and they got as close as possible, and that would result inshallah in the unity of the hearts. As the Messenger of Allah, he was keen to make sure that the rows are straight before he starts the prayer. And he would make sure that the shoulder to the shoulder, the feet to the feet, and so on and so forth. Second issue, before I start as well, I would like just as well to tell you that this is a course. It is not going through a book, as the admins and the shura had really decided that we're going to be doing some selective ahadith from the book Adab Al Mufrad for the Imam Al Bukhari rahimahullah. So we are aiming to finish this course in about 8 weeks. Now, we're going to skip lots of ahadiths. We're going to have some selective ahadiths. So if, for example, later on we found that we need to go through this very, I would say, very great book, then we might designate not the Wednesday classes, but the Monday classes to go through the rest of the ahadith and shed lights upon the ahadith of the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the book that we're going to be, inshallah, taking the ahadith from is the Adab Al Mufrad, and the brothers who are in the bookshop or the library had shown me this version of the translation. You've got translation, plenty of translation. I have seen this one, it's okay. I'm not saying this is the best because I haven't seen the rest, but it's the best I have seen myself. I can't say it is the best, but it's the best thing I have seen myself. And for those who cannot afford this, they could still download the Adab Al Mufrad from the internet. That's for free. You can download it. And I've seen the download version. The translation is not that great. But the book is very handy, and it's very good to have a book, because you need to write the notes that you need to write, because you will see that this great Imam had gathered, like he had gathered the best of the books and the most authentic book. After the book of Allah, that is the Sahih al-Bukhari, he had as well made immaculate books. One of them is the Adab Al Mufrad rahimahullah. So we're going to be talking about this book inshallah, but beforehand we're just making some introduction and we'd like to elucidate as well for my talk. The third issue, that is, it's 8 weeks, so we'd like the brothers to come to the class and regularly. For verily, not every class would depend upon the other, but I would say that sometimes I would refer to some of my classes which I have mentioned a particular story. So if I said that, you might have just said, I don't know about it. So I'm not really willing to go into a story again and again and again. Now we're going to, as all the da'iyas and all the students of knowledge and all the scholars that will start when they start a book and will select a hadith, we would not like to shed light, just shedding light upon the biography of the Imam, Al-Muhaddith, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Al-Imam al-Bukhari. We'll talk about his name, we'll talk about his kunya, we'll talk about his knowledge, we'll talk about his students, we'll talk about his teachers, we're going to talk about some other books that he had written, we'll talk about his ibadah, we'll talk about his manners and all of that inshallah with a brief. I'm not going to be going into details. So if anybody wants to do detailed things like this, I won't be hesitating to give him a help and to go to which books to seek more biography about the Imam. So, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. The tarjamah, the biography of the Imam al-Bukhari. I have gathered here a biography which is a short one. First of all, his lineage And his name, his kunya, nickname is called Abu Abdullah. Abu Abdullah, and Abdullah is the best of names, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala indicated to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said the best of names is Abdullah Abdul Rahman. And his name is Muhammad. Ibn Ismail, Ibn Ibrahim, Ibn al-Mughira, Ibn Bardizbah al-Ju'fi. Now, Bardizbah, I have said it in this way because there is a difference among the scholars how to say the name, Bardizbah or Bardizbah, but I've said it according to the most authentic sources, Bardizbah, and it is a Bukhari. By the way, when I'm talking about what's Bukhara, Bukhari language, and it means Zarra, means the ones who plants, the farmer. So Bardizbah, and Bardizbah was a Magian. So his great grandfather was a Magian. Magian means a fire worshipper. But his son, that is Al-Mughira, remember his name, we said Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Ibrahim. So his father is Ismail, his grandfather is Ibrahim, all of them are Muslims. His great grandfather is Al-Mughira, who is Muslim, he's the one who embraced Islam. He's the son of Bardizbah, who is the great grandfather, who was a Magian, fire worshipper, and died as well as a fire worshipper. But his son Al-Mughira had embraced Islam. Al-Ju'fi, this is a name which has been attributed to the Imam al-Bukhari. It is not one of the great grandfathers, but Al-Ju'fi because Al-Mughira himself, he had embraced Islam on the hand of Al-Yaman Al-Ju'fi, which is the one who was the mayor of Bukhara. He embraced Islam on the hands of the mayor of Bukhara, and that is why he took the name from him. He said Al-Ju'fi. So he's Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Ibrahim ibn Bardizbah al-Ju'fi. And this Bukhara, that he is as well, when you say Al-Bukhari is not one of his great grandfathers, but Al-Bukhari, it is because of the town, the city that he was born into. And it is a city which we call it Ma Wara al-Nahr, beyond the river. Beyond the river of Euphrates, beyond the river of Nahr al-Dijla wal-Furat. And its name is called Bukhara, and he comes from a city where lots of scholars had emerged from that. And lots of scholars had emerged from the town and the country itself. By the way, Bukhara was a capital before, a long time ago, to some tribes, and later on it was liberated, according to the historians, on the hands of the Umayyad era, Umayyad Khalifas. And the scholar Abu Abdullah Muhammad al-Ghanjar, who is from Bukhara, he had made a tarikh, or a history of those scholars who had emerged from Bukhara. Now Al-Bukhari, he was born on Friday, after the Friday Jumu'ah, and the timing was, the date was the 13th of Shawwal. Shawwal is the month that is after Ramadan, and it is in the calendar, it's called the 10th month, according to Islamic calendar, and it is 194 Hijrah. Hijrah, that's the date we should be dating with, not the Christian era, because Christian era depending upon the birth of the Lord, they say, Lord. And of course they're not really sure as well when he was born. So we say, we timing ourselves from the Hijrah, 194 Hijrah. So if I could ask anybody quickly, what is the year of the Hijri date now? Put your finger up. 1, 2, 3, go on. You made the mistake. But it's okay, good enough. At least you know the century. 1434, and you know that we have entered the year 434. Can anybody tell me what is the month? Put your finger up quickly. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, yes, month, no? He says Rabi' al-Awwal. Yes, of course. If you ask the Sufis, they will know about that, because this is the birth month of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right. Okay, coming back, and it was said, according to a number of books, that the Imam al-Bukhari's sight was not there. He was blind at the beginning, And his mother, she saw a vision with Ibrahim al-Khalil alayhi salam. So he said to her, "Oh mother, Allah had returned the sight of your son to your son because of your weeping, your crying, and because of your supplication." The weeping of the mother and the supplication of the mother resulted into the sight going back to Imam al-Bukhari. And by the way, we're going to see that the dua is a weapon that lots of people don't know about. But you need to be in a good relation with Allah, the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that your dua will be accepted. Inshallah, when we explain about the dua of Imam Bukhari. This is the biography, and then we go to the seeking of the knowledge. Seeking of the knowledge of the Imam, it started when he was a young lad, young boy. He used to preoccupy himself by memorizing hadith from the books, and he had memorized lots before he even reached the year 10 of his age, 10 years old. And he used to go to the muhaddithin, the people of knowledge, the scholars, and even he used to rectify some of their mistakes when he had reached 16 years old. He even rectified one of the stories, he rectified one of the mistakes of the scholar when he had said from such and such person to such and such person. He had narrated a chain. So he said, that person does not narrate from that person. So he said to him, "Quiet, boy." Then the scholar, he went inside, and then he realized the mistake, went out, and he said, "Young boy, what do you say?" He said, "I say that this person narrates from that person, not from this person." He said, "You're correct." And he started even rectifying in his own booklet what the boy had said, which is the Imam Bukhari rahimahullah. Also, he had memorized the books of Abdullah ibn Mubarak, the great Imam, and the great Imam al-Waqi'. Also, he had learnt and met from the fiqh, and those who are the followers or the companions of Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. Then he had went with his mother and his brother, and he went to Mecca to make Hajj. So when he made Hajj, his mother and his brother returned back, where he stayed there himself to search for the hadith and to take the knowledge. From his shuyukh, from his scholars, the one he taken from, so many there are. Even some of the scholars had made books of the shuyukh that Imam al-Bukhari had taken from, and listing them according to their, the first letter. Okay, it's like he made a list of the names according to the letter. So it's really encyclopedia. So for example, we have al-Mizzi in Tahdhib al-Kamal. He had made the Imam's Bukhari's scholars, and even he tried to make all of them. Also we have Imam al-Dhahabi in Siyar, and he had mentioned them according to their countries, the Shaykh of al-Bukhari. And also Al-Hafidh ibn Hajar rahimahullah, of course, he had mentioned them in the terms of the tabaqat. Tabaqat, who is higher than the other, and who is closer to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So here we have some of those countries. We mentioned some of them, and we mentioned some of the scholars that he had taken from. In Bukhara, before he had traveled to Mecca, he had heard from Abdullah ibn Muhammad al-Yaman al-Ju'fi al-Musnadi. That's one of the great scholars. In Balkh, also he had heard from Makki ibn Ibrahim, who was a great scholar. And he had heard in a place called Maru from Abdan ibn Uthman. And also he had heard in the place called Naysabur, which Imam Muslim comes from Yahya ibn Yahya and others. In Baghdad he had heard from Muhammad ibn Sabiq. In Basra he had heard from Abi Asim and Nabil and others. In Mecca he had heard from Abu Abdul Rahman al-Muqri'. And in Medina he had heard from Abdul Aziz al-Awsi. By the way, the Imam, he had traveled a lot. Even he said himself, I can't count how many times I went to Kufa, back and forward with the scholars, going in, out, to learn from the scholars. Also he has said, may Allah have mercy upon him, he said, Imam al-Bukhari, I have taken hadith, knowledge, from 1,080 men. 1,080 men. None of them is except he's a scholar in hadith. And all of them they used to say, Al-Iman qawlun wa amal yazid wa yanqus. All of them used to say that Iman comprises saying and actions, and it does go up and down. It decreases and increases. As for his students, there were so many. We mentioned those who had taken a lot and they are famous. Abu Isa Tirmidhi, well-known scholar. Abu Hatim, Ibrahim ibn Ishaq al-Harbi. Also we have Muhammad ibn Ishaq ibn Khuzaymah, rahimahullah, Abu Bakr. Also we have, I'm mentioning some of them, these are the well-known scholars. Also we have Al-Imam Muslim, rahimahullah, who had taken from his Shaykh, Imam Bukhari, in other than his Sahih. So lots of scholars, we have to thousands and thousands and thousands of scholars had taken knowledge from Imam Bukhari as to be great scholars. Even some of his shuyukh narrated from the Imam al-Bukhari himself. So Imam al-Bukhari, as the scholar said, the hadith muhaddith will not be a great muhaddith until he takes from his shuyukh, and he takes from one who is similar to him, and he takes as well from his students. So he's taken from all these three levels. As his scholarship sort of rank, he was a person who had a wide scope of knowledge. He used to used to read a lot. It was said that during the night he would lighten his Latin, the torch to his 20 times. Something comes to his mind, he puts that Latin, and then he writes something and he goes to sleep. That just shows how sincere he was. 20 times it was said during the night. He was a very gifted man in terms of memory-wise. And we have lots of stories about that. We're not going to really mention except one story, which was, this one is in the Basra. And that is the Imam came to the Basra, and some of the people had prepared for him some ahadith. He wanted to test his memory. And he was in Baghdad. So when they have said to him, they have appointed 10 people, and each person's got 10 hadith, so we've got a total of 100 hadith. Each person has said the ahadith in terms of, they have swapped some of the matan, that means they would mention the hadith in the correct chain, from this to this to that the Prophet ﷺ said, but actually it was not the Prophet ﷺ said that. It's the chain is correct, but the hadith is not correct. Also they have put the wordings of some of the hadith is just to be incorrect. Also they have put as well some of the names to be swapped. So they put, for example, instead of from Muhammad ibn Shihab al-Zuhri, from Abdullah ibn Umar, for example, they put the other way around, and as well. So they have made number of tests for each person, and each person would stand up and he would say, Imam, I would like to ask you about the following 10 hadith. Then he would say to him, each time he says to him, Qala Rasulullah, I don't know it. It's either because there's a change in the, as I said, in the wordings, or maybe the word is correct but the chain is not right, or the chain is some right but some of it is not right. He would say, I don't know it, I don't know it, I don't know it, I don't know this hadith, I don't know this hadith, until he had finished that 10. And then he sits down, he gives an answer, I don't know it. The other person, 10 people with 10 each, that's 100 hadith, and after they finished, he wanted the first to stand up. As for your first hadith, you said so and so and so, the correct is so and so and so, Prophet ﷺ said so and so. And he mentioned his 10 hadith, and his 10 hadith, 100. 10 people, this is, I would say even not a machine can do that. Not even a computer can do that. And that is why straight away the people of Baghdad had surrendered and submitted to the great power of the memory of the Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah wa. And we have as well, he said, Muhammad ibn Hamawiyah, he said, Sami'tu al-Bukhari, heard the Bukhari, he said, I memorized 100,000 hadith, which is sahih, and 200,000 which are not sahih. 100,000 which is authentic, and 200,000 which is not authentic. Now he memorized not just the wordings, also the chain of the hadith. We had at least 4 names in the chain. Right, and as I said, I'm not going to mention so many news about that, but we're going to go to what the scholars had said regarding him. All the ummah had consensus, and I'm saying the ummah of Ahl Sunnah, not the Shia. Shia, they don't like anything in Bukhari, rahimahullah. They don't really consider Bukhari as to be muhaddith. I'm saying all the ummah, they had at that time and at this time, they had consensus and they have unanimous and agreement. That is Imam Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari, he is Amirul Mu'mineen, the leader of the believers. Nobody can match him in the hadith, rahimahullah. And all the scholars of hadith, they used to testify to this effect, and they say he's the best. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, who is the great Imam? Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. He's mentioned in the table would shake. He used to say, Ma akhrajat Khurasan. Khurasan, the land where Bukhari is that did not produce somebody who's like Muhammad ibn Ismail. And Muhammad ibn Ismail, he was one of the students of Imam Ahmad. He's older than, Imam Ahmad was older than Imam Bukhari. He saw him, he said, no way that the land of Khurasan had produced somebody like Muhammad ibn Ismail. Al-Imam Muslim, who was his student, he said, and he's not from far away from Marw, not far away from there, and from the capital Samarkand. And he said, Wallahi, I testify that there is nothing compared to this Imam in the whole dunya. He said to him, Ashhadu. He testified, Wallahi, I testify. And he was talking to the Imam Bukhari, that there is nobody like you in this dunya. This is Imam Muslim, who is the second book after the Imam Bukhari. And we just suffice ourselves with the saying of Imam Al-Hakim, rahimahullah, Sahib al-Mustadrak, the one who brought the Mustadrak. He said, Huwa Imam Ahl al-Hadith, he is the Imam of Ahl al-Hadith bila khilaf. No difference among the scholars, Bayna Ahl al-Naql, for those who had conveyed the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Al-Imam al-Bukhari himself, he says, rahimahullah, that Amr ibn Ali, one of the great scholars, he had some students and they wanted to talk to me about some of the hadiths. And they mentioned one hadith, I said, I don't know it. I don't know this hadith. So those companions of this great scholar, they said, oh, so now we know that maybe our Shaykh is better than Imam al-Bukhari, that he doesn't know this hadith. So straight away they went to their scholar, Amr ibn Ali. He said, no, Imam al-Bukhari doesn't know that hadith. He said, a hadith that Muhammad ibn Ismail doesn't know it is not a hadith. So forget about even comparing me to him. A hadith that Muhammad ibn Ismail doesn't know is not a hadith. And Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, who is a very great scholar at the time of Imam Ahmad as well, he used to say, and he was much older than him, right from that chap, he was a chap compared to his age, young boy, teenager, right from that chap, it means Bukhari. Verily, if he was at the time of Al-Hasan al-Basri, the people would have wanted him because of his knowledge in the hadith and his fiqh. Imam Bukhari, he is known to be the muhaddith, but he is the faqih of this ummah, as the scholars had said. Ulama Makkah, the scholars of Makkah, they used to say, Muhammad ibn Ismail, Imamuna wa faqihuna wa faqihu Khurasan. He is our Imam, Muhaddithuna, he is our Muhaddith, and also he is the Faqih of Khurasan. Muhammad ibn Hatim, rahimahullah, he said, I have heard Mahmud ibn Nadr, which is kunya as Abu Sahl al-Shafi'i. He said, I have entered Basra and Sham and Hijaz and Kufa, and I've seen the scholars, and every time Muhammad ibn Ismail Bukhari is being mentioned, they would say, he is better than us, he is better than us, he is more knowledgeable than us. And if you want more saying like this, you could just go to Fath al-Bari, in the introduction of Muqaddimah Fath al-Bari, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. Now his ibadah, in terms of his, you could say, worshipping of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and his obedience to Allah Azza wa Jal, and his virtues of excellencies regarding his righteousness. The Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah also, he gathered the fiqh and gathered the hadith, but he as well gathered between the knowledge and the ibadah. So he combined between the knowledge and he combined as well between the worship. So he used to recite the Quran plenty and a lot of times, especially in Ramadan. It was narrated, and the chain here is under the question whether it's correct or incorrect. People will explain it. That is, he used to finish the whole of the Quran in every day. So finish the whole of the Quran every day. Now, when we hear this from the Salaf, that they used to do it, like was mentioned from Imam as well from Uthman ibn Affan radiallahu anhu. We first of all, we don't really say that it is, he's a bad person to do that, because we know for the fact that the Prophet ﷺ, he said to Abdullah ibn As, who was a person who was powerful enough to read the Quran in even less than a day. But the Prophet of Allah, he said to him, don't read it less than 3 days. For verily the person to understand it, he has to read it at least in a maximum period of what? 3 days. You can't go less than that. So the period that you need for reciting the Quran with comprehension and understanding, then you need it for at least 3 days. And he told him off, and he forbade him from doing it for less than 3 days. So if Imam al-Bukhari, we heard about this, or Imam Ahmad, or the Sahabi Uthman ibn Affan, that he used to recite the whole of the Quran in 1 rak'ah, which is unauthentic. But if it is authentic, then we say that those Imams, they didn't know about this hadith. Okay, they didn't know about this hadith. We have found them an excuse. Waqi', mashallah, the great scholars who Imam Bukhari as well had taken from Waqi', as in taken from his books, and he memorized his books. It was said that he used to recite the Quran in 1 day. And Imam al-Dhahabi, who was a great scholar, in his biography about Imam Waqi', he said to him, yes, well, Waqi', he is a great man, how can we become like Waqi'? But if he said that, it will not be something to imitate. We can't imitate, because the Prophet of Allah told us not to recite the Quran for less than 3 days. And Waqi' as well, he said it is okay for the person to drink from if you remember, the alcohol which is made from the barley, as long as it doesn't get you drunk, because he's following Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah. So he made this zalla, this mistake, depending upon what ahadith he had. So we can't imitate those people. The one we could imitate, and he is infallible, is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the ones we can imitate in terms of group as the companions in their totality, not in their individuality, as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam once said, لا تجتمع أمتي على ضلالة. Right, so here going back here, Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, also he used to go to the Taraweeh, and after he finished the Taraweeh, every 3 nights he would as well finish the whole Quran, and that would be acceptable. And also, if something is harming him while he's praying, he will not stop until he finishes. It was said that there was a zambur, which is like a wasp, that stings. The wasp was going into his house, and it was stinging him 17 times in 17 places. And he was praying, and some of the people said, why don't you just stop your prayer? You've been stung with this wasp. He said, well, I was in a surah, and I'd love to continue it. I don't want to break it. And he has the right to break it off because of that wasp, but he didn't break it. Even the harm did not stop him from the ibadah. He said, may Allah have mercy upon him, in terms of his wara', scrupulence, he said, أرجو أن ألقى الله, I hope that I meet Allah Azza wa Jal, ولا يحاسبني, and then he does not, ولا يحاسبني, and then he does not account me for that I have made ghiba to anyone. Every time Imam al-Bukhari, he would say about a person, for example, he's weak in the hadith, he would use the very soft words in saying that this person is not good in his memory. He would not use harsh words. Also, his supplication was to be fulfilled. And when he had been put in trial, and we're going to talk about the trial, he had made a dua in which he said, oh Allah, the land is not really encompassing me. And so if it is so, oh Allah, if this land is not encompassing me, oh Allah, take me to you. And straight away, less than a month, he died. So his supplication was to be fulfilled, and he was known for that. And he used to say something which I would like you as well to engrave it in your mind and your hearts. That is, ما ينبغي للمسلم أن يكون حال إذا دعا لم يستجب له. It is not fitting for the believer, for the Muslim, in a situation or a circumstance, in a status where if he calls and supplicates to Allah, his supplication is not fulfilled. Look at that. The Muslim should not be in a situation, in circumstances, in such a status that if he calls Allah, his supplication is not fulfilled. Meaning, you have been filled up with sins and disobedience of Allah, far away from Allah the Almighty, and that is why your supplication is not fulfilled. You should not be like that. So your supplication should be straight away fulfilled. So he said, and it was said to, so I said, it was said to him, by the wife of his brother. Did you try yourself with this? I mean, you say that Muslims should be fulfilled in supplication. Did you try yourself on that? He said, yes. I have called my Lord twice, and he had responded to me. And then after that, I didn't want to call and make supplication, because it might decrease my hasanat, my rewards, or it might be given to me straight away, and it will be not saved for me for the hereafter. And this is, by the way, the sunnah. You know, if you call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, either He will fulfill all of it, or some of it, He will not fulfill it, and He will save it for you in paradise. And the best thing is what for you? To be saved in paradise. And that is why when that woman came to the Prophet ﷺ, she said, Messenger of Allah, inni usra', I've got epilepsy. Go make Allah Azza wa Jal, that, to remove that epilepsy. He said, well, I would do so. My supplication is fulfilled, but if you are patient, paradise is yours. She said, I want paradise. When she left, she said, but Messenger of Allah, I just want you to supplicate for me that if I get this epilepsy, leave the epilepsy alone, but if I get it, I don't get naked. So the Prophet ﷺ, he had made a supplication that if she's gotten that circumstances, she does not take off her clothes. That man, the same thing when he came to the Prophet ﷺ, the blind man, he asked for the dua. He said, if you wish, it's better for you paradise, or you went to make the dua. So the dua, if it's not fulfilled, then it will be saved for you in the hereafter. And that is why he said, I don't want to make the dua, I want it to be what? Saved for me in the hereafter, because I know that my dua, Allah Azza wa Jal, He responds to it. So he says, مَا حَاجَةُ الْمُسْلِمِ إِلَى الْكَذِبِ وَالْبُخْلِ. The Muslim is not in need to lie, and he's not in need to be stingy. أَخْلَاقُ. Now coming to his manners, become some of his manners. Rahimahullah, he was a very generous man, and he used to spend a lot on the poor people, especially those who are the ones seeking knowledge from him, those who are his friends. So the ones who are seeking knowledge from him, those who are his companions. And if I just read one of these stories, Abdullah ibn Muhammad al-Salifi, he says, I was with Abu Abdullah, Imam al-Bukhari, in his house. His slave girl, she came and she wanted to enter. And she stepped over his ink, that he uses for writing. And she had spilt it in between his papers in his hand. So he says to her, how do you walk? She says, well, if there is no way, how can I walk? Because there's papers here, there's ink here. So he said, and he just did like this, you are free. A person having something like this happen to him, he will not say you are free, come here and I will give you. So it was said to him, Abu Abdullah, did she make you angry? The slave girl. He said, if she made me angry, I have made myself pleased with what I have done. So I please myself with what I've done. This, the last thing which is before us, where we talk about his death, his trial and his patience, because he was exactly in the same way as Imam Ahmad was put to trial, but not that much as Imam Ahmad was whipped, but we will talk about it. It was Muhammad ibn Ismail ibn Bukhari, rahimahullah, when he was in Naysabur, and Muhammad ibn Yahya, Zuhali, he said to the people of Naysabur, go to this man, he was the righteous one, and listen to him. So the people went to him and to listen from him until some people had envied the Imam al-Bukhari. Because what happened, this man, which is Muhammad ibn Yahya, he had seen most of the people going to his class, and his class now is getting empty. So he had some envy towards him, why the students are leaving him to go to him. So what he wanted, he actually planned to do something to the Imam al-Bukhari by putting him to test. So he sent someone to ask him in the question, which is to do, if you remember, we talked about it in Usul al-Sunnah, that is, lafzi bil-Quran makhluq, that your uttering of the Quran is to be created. And you know for a fact that the Quran, the book of Allah, is the words of Allah, it's not created. But they're asking him about this question, which is, my uttering of the Quran, that is the movement of my tongue, is makhluk, is it created or not? So when the people came to Imam al-Bukhari and to his circle, and one of these people, those men who had been, I could say, planned and planted by that, Yahya ibn Yahya, Muhammad ibn Yahya. So he had stood up and he said, Abu Abdullah, what do you say regarding my uttering of the Quran? Lafzi bil Quran. What do you say regarding this issue? Is it makhluq, created, or is it not makhluq? So Al-Bukhari did not respond to him. And the man said again, and he repeated what he said. And the Imam al-Bukhari did not say anything. Then he said in the third one, Imam al-Bukhari, then he looked and he said, Al-Quran, the Quran, Kalamullah, the words of Allah, غير مخلوق, not created. وَأَفْعَالُ الْعِبَادِ مَخْلُوقًا, but the actions of the people are to be created. And the testing, the trial here that you're putting to test is a bid'ah. So the man, he had made a noise and a clamor, and the people started making a clamor, and then he left Imam al-Bukhari, and the Imam al-Bukhari sat in his house. Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan, rahimahullah, he said that, he narrates for us that Bukhari had said, أعمال العباد كلها مخلوقة, that all of the actions of the ibad, and that's why he wrote أفعال العباد, all of it to be makhluqa, created. And they were saying to him, why don't you just go back on your saying? He said, how can I go back something with what I believe in it? If you bring me something stronger than what I say, then I will take it. So Yahya, he had said, I have been admired on the Imam al-Bukhari's affirmance regarding his statement. Al-Hakim, he said as well, حدثنا طاهر بن محمد الوراق قال سمعت محمد بن شاذل قال يقول when it happened between Muhammad ibn Yahya and al-Bukhari, this issue, I have entered on the Bukhari and I said, Abu Abdullah, what do we do regarding this thing that is happening between you, Muhammad ibn Yahya? And every person comes, to you, he will be kicked out. And Muhammad ibn Yahya, he's got an envy regarding the knowledge regarding yourself. So he said to him that, Ya Bunay, my dear son, this is a matter which is an issue which I feel is an issue that brings problems. It brought problems to Imam Ahmad, and you know what happened to him. So I did not talk about it whatsoever, as Rahimahullah had said. Al-Dhahabi, he said, Al-Mas'alatu, regarding this matter, that we know that the Quran is makhluq, but our actions, the Quran is not makhluq, it is not created, it's the words of Allah, but our action is to be makhluq. Now, this mihna, if you want to read about it as well, it is being mentioned in a number of books, and you could go to Fath al-Bari, you will read about it as well. In his last thing we talk about, before we start with the book, his death. Imam Bukhari, rahimahullah, he died because of illness, and he died on the 30th of Ramadan, just on the night before the Eid al-Fitr, 256. That means he had lived for 62 years, almost, just about less than 13 days, maybe less. So 62 years, and all his life was full of knowledge, full of ibadah. May Allah give him the best of jaza. Rahimallahu al-Imam al-Bukhari. Imam al-Bukhari had left for us a number of books, more than 20. More than 10 has been printed, still some of them yet to be printed. We just mentioned them. Al-Jami' al-Sahih, which is the Sahih al-Bukhari. Al-Adab Al Mufrad, which is the book we're going to be selecting some hadith from. Then Al-Tarikh, the history, the big, the middle, Al-Kabir, Al-Awsat, Al-Saghir, Khalq Af'al al-Ibad, the creation of the actions of the people, and الرد على الجهمية, الجامع الكبير, المسند الكبير, الأشربة, الهبة, and أسامي الصحابة, الوحدان, المبسوط, المختلف والمختلف, and العلل, الكنى والفوائد, رفع اليدين في الصلاة, بر الوالدين, الضعفاء, قضايا الصحابة والتابعين, وأقاويلهم. All of those books he had written, and the book that we are explaining, inshallah, and I'm not going to talk about Sahih Bukhari, because Sahih Bukhari is a book in itself, it needs lecture in itself, but we go to our book, which is the book, the Adab Al Mufrad. Al-Adab Al Mufrad is a collection of manners, this Adab Al Mufrad, and it has lots of chapters to do with manners, and it was called Adab Al Mufrad Al-Adab, which is the manners. Example of the early Muslims, the manners. So the Adab is manners. But Al-Mufrad singled out. The reason behind this is to differentiate between this book and the chapter of Al-Adab in Sahih al-Bukhari. Was in Sahih al-Bukhari, this chapter is called Al-Adab. And in that chapter, Kitab al-Adab, that there is all of the hadith to be authentic. We know that the Sahih al-Bukhari, all the scholars, they have agreed that we agree upon the hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari to be authentic. But whereas this book is Al-Adab Al Mufrad, Imam al-Bukhari did not make a condition upon himself to put only the Sahih. So he gathered the hadith with their chain and he left it for the scholar to decide. And this book, it contains Sahih, contains authentic, contains unauthentic, contains Hasan, which is authentic but not as strong as the Sahih. So it's called authentic and non-authentic. Alright, in this book. So we're going to be, of course, choosing the one which is authentic, and we're going to be shedding light upon the benefits that we gain from every hadith. So we go ahead for the people who are got the book, and we're going to ask our doctor here to recite the selected hadith that I have chosen, and inshallah this will be the start of our book. Okay, so I'll study which hadith and you will just go ahead with it, okay? Right. Bismillah. Right, the hadith we're going to have selected to go ahead with is hadith number, it is a chapter, which is chapter, the same first chapter, the chapter which is to do with Al-Walidan. Yes? What is the name of the chapter, please? The chapter which is? The first chapter.
Chapter 1 is on the words of Allah the Exalted.
Oh no, this is the subtitle. I'm talking about the compassion. No, sir, it's not. Right, well, we're going to put the titles on it. No, these are the subtitles. We're going to be, okay, so he's talking about, right, I have, so you could say these are chapters name, but we could call them sub-chapters, but those chapters now, we could list them into something which is a title for them. He's going to talk about the two parents, so the parents. So the first one is the parents. We're going to choose from that the hadith number 8, please.
In the English version that we have shown,
Hadith number 8, and read the chapter title.
it's on page 2, chapter 5, on kind words to parents.
No.
Number 8, hadith, is it hadith?
Yeah.
TH4.
Yes.
Taysala bin Mayyas said,
Taysala. Taysala? No, it's Taysala. Under a second. Let's just make sure that we have correct. Taysala, that's right. Correct.
Taysala bin Mayyas said,
Yes.
I was with the Najadites.
Najadat.
Khawarij, the follower of Najdah ibn Amr.
This is the explanation of the author, Jazakallah khairan for doing so. The explanation of the translator. And Najadat. Those are the ones who are
Follower of Najdah ibn Amr.
Najdah ibn Amr. Yes, from the Khawarij.
When I committed wrong actions, which I supposed to be major sins, I mentioned that to Ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. He inquired, what are they? I said, such and such. He stated, these are not great sins. There are 9 great sins, and they are associating things with Allah, killing someone,
Go on.
and they are associating things with Allah, killing someone, desertion from the army when it is advancing, slandering a chaste woman, usury, consuming an orphan's property, heresy in the sacred mosque of Makka, scoffing at Muslims, and causing one's parents to weep through disobedience. Ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma then said to me, do you fear the fire? Do you want to enter the garden? I I said, by Allah, yes. He asked, are your parents still alive? He replied, my mother is. He said, by Allah, if you speak kindly to her and feed her, then you will definitely enter the garden as long as you avoid the major sins.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Imam al-Bukhari rahimahullah, in this great title, which is the chapter regarding the two parents, he had set number of titles for his chapters, and I will read some of them. He started with the ayah, قول الله تعالى ووصينا الإنسان بوالديه حسنا, and we had counseled the mankind to be good to his parents. And then he talked about the righteousness of the mother, righteousness of the father. Then he talked about to have good words and soft words to the fathers and the mother. Then he had as well talked about the recompense of the two parents, and talked about the result of being undutiful to your parents. He talked about the one who curses Allah, curses his parents, Allah will curse him. And also he talked about the following of the parents as long as they don't disobey Allah Azza wa Jal. And he talked about, later on he talked about as well how the person deals with his father if he's not a Muslim, or his mother, and so on and so forth. So we chose now this chapter which is to be lenient to the parents. And the hadith is from Taysala, and he is Ali ibn Mayyas, his name. He said, I was with Najadites, and as he said, as explained, and Amr al-Najdi, that is the Najadites, he's from the Khawarij. And Khawarij are the ones who detach themselves from the Ali ibn Abi Talib's army, and the ones who seize the sword against the Muslims unless you adopt their ideologies. The closest thing that you could explain to them, that they are closer than this era, the ones who call themselves al-Muhajirun. He said, I was with this Najadat, and I have committed lots of sins because of killing people who are innocent. And I saw that this is really big kabair when I was with the Najadat. So I mentioned that to Abdullah ibn Umar. I have done so. Maybe he did not go as far as the killing, but he has done as well maybe a wrong interpretation to the text and so on and so forth. So Abdullah ibn Umar, he said, these are not from the kabair. Then the kabair, he said, are 9. According to what Abdullah ibn Umar had said, it's 9, but he had chosen those 9. There are more than 9. Okay, there are more than 9, more than 100. But here he mentioned 9, the most important ones. He said, al-ishraku billah, associating something or someone, a rival with Allah Azza wa Jal. Al-ishraku billah, and here he's talking about the major shirk. Because minor shirk is not from the kabair, minor. Major shirk, person calling with Allah Azza wa Jal, another deity, slaughtering to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And by the way, slaughtering to other than Allah is not to slaughter just in the name of other than Allah. No, you could slaughter in the name of Allah, but to other than Allah. So you see, Bismillah, but yet you're slaughtering it for example, a king, and you're not even eating it. You're just slaughtering it because the king had passed by you. And this is called slaughtering for other than Allah, even though that you have mentioned the name of Allah. And the ishraku billah, then after that he said, وَقَتْلُ نَسَمَةٍ, that is a person killing another person. And this is the second in line in terms of sin after the ishrak. A person killing another person. That's why the shaitan, he had said to the shaitan Iblis, he said to the shaitan, to the one who made his brother to kill his brother, he said, you are the one, and he had put him in his place and he gave him the crown. Because he had made him to kill his brother. Then we said, وَالْفِرَارُ مِنَ الزَّحْفِ, the person who fled, he goes away, he runs away when the army meets one another. So you are with your army, and the commander told you to go and go forward and march forth, but you ran away and you let your brothers down. This is kabira. Unless the commander had decided to do so, like for example Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anhu, when he was at the time in the battle of Mu'tah, and after the 3 commanders were killed, Zayd and Abdullah, Ja'far and Abi Talib and Abdullah, all of the 3 were killed. Khalid Walid, he had made a technique, a plan through which he had saved the Muslim army, but he was going back. And the Romans, they thought that he's laying an ambush for them. and that is okay. So the person who is not running to let his brothers, but actually is a technique, متحيز لفئة, is no problem, inshallah. And also he says, وَقَذْفُ الْمُحْصَنِ, slandering the chaste woman. Slandering the chaste woman, to use of fornication. Because the society will be straight away collapsed and destroyed if you start talking about the women, the believing women, that they are making, illegitimate and not religious relationship with men, and this will destroy the whole society. That is why قَذْفُ الْمُحْصَنَةِ, the person who does so, he will be lashed straight away. And the lashes will be 80 lashes according to the scholar, according to the had. And وَأَكْلُ الرِّبَى, consuming usury. Consuming usury, usually the riba is so many types. See, the riba, some of it is, you could see it, which is I would give you £5 and I give you £5.50. That's clear-cut riba. But there is the riba which is the hidden one, which is riba al-fadl. Riba al-nasiya is known, that is by time you give riba al-fadl, they call it the hidden riba. Who amongst you knows? How many of you knows that, for example, if you sell gold to gold, and there is in carats difference, is a type of riba. So if I, for example, told you, I'm giving you 5 grams of 24 carats, which is pure gold. Can you give me instead of that 20 carats of 18 grams? You would say, yeah, okay. Because you work it out in your brains and your head and you say, all right, we'll swap it. So he gives you 5 grams of 24 carats of gold, and you give him, and he gives you give him 5 grams, and he gives you what? 20 grams of 18 carats of gold. Now, if you work it out in your brain, it will work maybe the same in terms of money-wise. How much is a gram of gold at the 24 carats? A lot compared to the 18 carat. But this type of deal is riba. So how can I do that? You have to sell your gold and get the money, and then you buy the 18 carats. You can't swap like that. So how many knows this thing? So the riba is got lots of, ways. How many of you knows that, for example, this cashback issue that came with the mobiles is a type of riba? Not the cashback when you put your, debit card, for example. Would you like cashback? It's not talking about that. I'm talking about the, that happened. It was about, I think 5 years ago, when all this was flying around. You could get such and such, and for free after 6 months you send your bill and you get your money back. All of that as well, riba. How many people don't know that? So the riba, consuming the riba, and Allah Azza wa declared the war against the person who eats the riba. وَأَكْلُ مَالِ الْيَتِيمِ, devouring the wealth of an orphan. Because the orphan who's got no father, and he's less than 12 years old. If he's above 12 years old, he's not an orphan anymore. If he's got a father, no mother, is not an orphan, Islamically. The orphan is the one who's got lost, that's the one who supports him. The one who is financially supports him and as well physically supports him. That is the father. Because the father figure is not there, then the child is, vulnerable. So if he is 12, if he's been looked after, this orphan, by someone, and it is easy for that person to take his money, which is inherited, for example, that orphan from his father or from his mother, it's easy, to consume that money without knowing, because nobody knows you as a kid. So Allah is saying to you that this is what? Major sin to do such a thing. And He's warning you. And making ilhad fil masjid, kufr. To make kufr outside the masjid, is a great sin. But to make ilhad in the masjid, that's worse. And that is why some of the scholars, they said, yet regarding making sins in Mecca, the sins will not multiply, definitely. Allah multiplies the what? The hasanat. But they say in terms of sin, it is great. How can you, if a person making a sin inside the house of Allah, Mecca itself, he's bound to make a greater sin in the house of Allah Azza wa Jal. He's bound to make more sins into the street. So that's why he said ilhad fil masjid, taking ilhad, which is not believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَالَّذِي يَسْتَسْخِرْ, the ones who scorn and takes the mick of the believers because of their religion, not because of their characteristics. For example, a person's got a long ear or pole ear or something wrong with his eyes and takes the mick, this is a sin. This is under وَيْلِ لِكُلِّ هُمَزَةٍ لُمَزَةٍ. under the umbrella of what? Backbiting, slandering. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the person who take the mick out of the Muslim because of their religion. Like the hypocrites, they've done that in the Tabuk when they went back. And they were saying about the reciters of the Quran, they are really good. And when they talk, but they are good as well. They had taken the mick out of them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet about these hypocrites. And Allah Azza wa Jal had sent down some verses from Surah Tawbah regarding these people. And He said, قَدْ كَفَرْتُمْ لَا تَعْتَذِرُوا. Don't apologize, you have made disbelief. This person will discount at the believers. Like he says, look at the person, he's got a beard like a broom. A'udhu billah. You're making the beard like a broom, that's kufr in itself. And then he says, وَبُكَاءُ الْوَالِدَيْنِ مِنَ الْعُقُوقِ. To make your parents who are in need of you, especially when they are old. The old parents are in need of their children more than when they are young. To make them cry because of being undutiful to them. The father is crying because you're raising up your voice against him. And he's crying. This son of mine, which I used to look after him. The mother, you're abusing her. And she's saying, the one I used to change your nappies. Look now, you're powerful enough to go and spit at me or insult me or talk to me harshly. A'udhu billah. So you make them cry. Because you see, they don't want to make a dua against you. Even you are a person who is evil enough to speak ill against them, but they are not willing to make a dua against you because they know their dua is fulfilled straight away. Fulfilled regardless of the dua. And you know the story of Ibn Jurayj. Wallahi, that story, every time I look, subhanallah. She was asking Jurayj to do something to her, and Jurayj was busy, preoccupied by praying. Praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And she was calling him. And he was saying, oh Allah, shall I continue the prayer? Shall I answer my mother? Second time. Third time. And all the time he favors his prayer. So he continued his prayer. And because his mother, she said that this person is not really, my son is not responding to me. Even his praying, she knows his praying. She said, oh Allah, don't make him to die unless he sees the faces of the prostitutes. That's really, I would say injustice from the mother to make a dua like that. Because this person, her son, is preoccupied by the ibadah, definitely he will not be able to see the women. So he made a dua against her son. She couldn't say, oh Allah, kill him. Oh Allah, don't. She wants him to keep away from the ibadah, go to the dunya. Don't make him to die unless he sees the face of the prostitutes. Now he heard this supplication. And the story goes on that some of the people wanted to make the Jurayj to be drifted away from the ibadah. So they couldn't do anything. And then a woman, she said, I will prostitute, I will drift him away. So what she did, she tempted one of his disciples. He's a shepherd man, he came to his sawma, which is like a house of worship. And he started following Jurayj, but this woman, she approached that guy until she made him to fornicate with her. And when she fornicated with her, she was pregnant. And the people of the village, they brought her to say, well, who's that son belongs to? She said, it belongs to Jurayj. So they brought Jurayj and said, this is she's claimed his son. We're going to really now, implement the prescribed punishment upon you. Well, death, because you are why is it fornication? She said that he's your son. So when he came out of his sawma, he saw the face of whom? Of that woman who's a prostitute. He smiled. And then he said, okay, let me pray. Then he prayed 2 rak'ah. Then he went back and he asked the boy who was still in the cradle, who is your father? And he's one of the 4 boys who spoke in the cradle. And he pointed to the shepherd man, he is my father. So as soon as they heard this, the villagers straight away, they said, and they apologized to him, and because they demolished as well his sawma, his worshiping place. They said, shall we build it for you in gold? He said, no, just turn it back. And he's the first one to make us, to pray 2 rak'ah before the death. Before the death, man, we pray 2 rak'ah. Communicated with Allah Azza wa Jal. Now, They asked him, why did you smile? He said, I remembered the supplication of my mother. Oh Allah, don't make Jurayj to die before he sees the faces of the prosecutor. And I saw it. Allah fulfilled their supplication. Even though it looks like it's injustice. To show you that the mother and the father are very important. The mother and the father, very important. You have to be lenient. You have to be soft and kind the way you talk to them. And this is where he had said, بُكَاءُ الْوَالِدَيْنِ مِنَ الْعُقُوقِ. Then Abdullah ibn Umar, he said to me, and it's to Ali ibn Mayyas, he said, are you scared of the fire? Do you like to enter paradise? I said, Wallahi, yes. He said, your parents are alive? He said, I just got my mother. He said, well, if you are lenient to her in the way you speak to her, and you fed her, Wallahi, you will enter paradise. As long as you avoid the what? The major sins. The minor sins will be taken away. Just be lenient to your mother. And this is a great hadith regarding Babu Lil Kalami Lil Walidain. Right, now we go to hadith, and this is the last thing we're going to handle in our topic. I'll tell you what, because I don't want people to get bored. So okay, we will, inshallah, next week, we will be taking hadith number 16. Not this time, next 16, so we'll prepare it quick. Hadith number 16, hadith al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah, right? So for that, inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us upon the haqq and die upon the haqq. If you have any questions, go ahead. Hadith number 16 this week, inshallah. Now, if you have any questions, what we have heard, I know that we haven't really gone into the book itself, but we have just mentioned one hadith. If you have any question regarding the story of Imam Bukhari, regarding what we have heard from the chapter, go ahead. If you have any suggestions as well, we are open, because it's the beginning of our the course, beginning of our 8-week course. Now, تفضل. Right. A person is asking that I don't understand the trial of Imam Bukhari. A person asking a question, he gives them the right answer. So where is the problem? You see, the question was, what do you say about the lafz uttering? Now, when we say Quran غير مخلوق, the Quran is not created. Okay. We don't really add to it as well. لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق. My uttering of the words is to be created, because my uttering is my action. Saying that is not really part of the aqidah, because it is like it makes a gate open for those mubtadi'ah to come in and to add and subtract. So he was asking him about that particular thing. Imam Bukhari did not say لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق. So anybody thought or under the impression that Imam Bukhari has said that, he did not say that. But he's saying that this is the thing, why you're asking this question. This question is to do with kalam, ahlul kalam. So he said to him a general statement that af'alul ibadi makhluq. The actions of the people are to be what? Created. Of course they are created, otherwise we're going to be Mu'tazila. Mu'tazila is saying that you don't create your action. No, we created. So our actions is not we created, it's created by Allah. Do you understand that? So we say that Allah created us and He created our actions. So He created our utterings. But we don't go, He created like this. We created our utterings, which is the uttering even of the Quran, which is the word of Allah. Why is this philosophy? So they wanted to take that on him, that Imam Bukhari said, لَفْظِي بِالْقُرْآنِ مَخْلُوق. As a statement which hasn't been said before, it's a bid'ah. So they wanted to make like a disturbance and to make something a fuss out of nothing, and they have succeeded in that. But the Imam Bukhari, he never said that word, and he did not indulge into this matter. And even he said to him, remember that Imam, he said to him, this matter is mash'uma, like it brings pessimism, and it had put Imam Ahmad in trouble, but not this word, something else, because that one before, Ahmad ibn Du'ad, may Allah curse him, he had made the people to say Al-Qur'anu makhluq. The Quran is created, and this is kufr, by the way. Quran is not makhluq, it's the words of Allah. Ala lahu al-khalq wal-amr. Allah, for Him the khalq and the amr. And the Quran, by His command, it is not creation. Otherwise we're going to end up saying Allah created His own self. Do you understand? No.
What age was Imam Bukhari's vision?
When he was young boy, about 6 years old. No. Fadal. By the way, that's if the story is authentic. Because some of this is authentic. Fadal. No question? Power talk. What was the dua of the mother of Imam al-Bukhari? The dua of Imam al-Bukhari there was no specific dua, but she was asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bring the sight to her own son. But she used to cry a lot and she was sincere in her dua, as if the story is authentic. And she saw a vision before she's giving the glad tidings that the sight of her son has come back. She said a vision of Ibrahim alayhi salam telling her that Allah Azza wa Jalla responded to your supplication and He given the sight back to your son, and because of your dua and your weeping and your tears. So she woke up the following day and the sight came back to Imam al-Bukhari. That is, as I said, if it's unauthentic, but number of very good sort of books which are senior books and senior scholars, they treat that as to be authentic. Now, Fadal, Khawla.
This hadith, what is the reference for this?
Which hadith?
The one we discussed.
Oh, you mean the one we read from the Bukhari? Okay, when we say this hadith is sahih, first of all, the reference for it, you go to Adab Al Mufrad. But if you more details of this, then you could go to, for example, the Sheikh Al-Albani's books, and it gives you more of traces. So, for example, I'm going to give you now some of the books that has been mentioned. That would narrate this hadith. Sorry about that. No. Okay. We have it. Hadith number 8. And it is in the Sahih of Shaykh Al-Albani 2898. 2898. Now. Any questions? تفضل يا مقدم. Why did the scholars wrote any unauthentic narrations in their books? Why don't they take them out? A person would ask this question because he doesn't know the knowledge of the hadith. Basically, there are a number of reasons why. Either the scholar who had put this hadith, he thought it was authentic, and he left it for the scholars with a chain to look. Maybe they will find it's not authentic. That's number one. Number two, this person, he knows it's unauthentic. He puts it there in case there will be another narration coming from a different direction, will support this, and will two together become stronger to strengthen that. Number three, that this person, he puts it, he knows it's fabricated for this case of that it will not be making confusion to the people to mix it up with the sahih. So lots of reasons why they wrote this. So if there is no hadith da'if that has been written, then lots of the hadith sahih will be not there, because some of the hadith sahih were sahih because of 3-4 narrations from weak chain came together, they made strength to one another, and they became sahih. Is that okay? No. Fadal.
The book you're referring to us, the list of more than 100 major sins.
Huh?
Any book.
In a book, well, the book of Imam al-Dhahabi, checked by Sheikh Mashhur, Hafidhahullah, in which he had made more than 120 kabira in that one. Kabair, Imam al-Dhahabi, which is well known, so it's very good, and it's got the major sins now. Fadal.
When you say be kind to your mother and feed her, does that mean when you visit her you bring some food with you?
Being kind to your mother doesn't mean that you visit her. Well, visiting the mother, affording the mother, giving money to the mother, is all of it part of their being dutiful to your mother. So, some of the hadith which we have skipped, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu arda, he was so kind to his mother that every time he goes in the morning, when he goes to work, or he goes out in the morning, Assalamu alayka ya ummata, may peace be upon you, ummata. Oh Allah, have mercy upon you, just like you have looked after me when I was young. So he's passing mercy upon her because she looked after me young. So, and she replies back, Salamu alayka ya bunay. My dear son, peace be upon you. Jazakallahu khairan, because you are dutiful to me when I'm old. So that's in the morning and in the evening. In the morning and in the evening. He would stand on her house and calls that. Salamu alayka ya ummata. Rahimakillah kama rabbaytini saghira. And she would reply back, Salamu alayka ya bunay. Jazakallahu khairan kama barartani kabira. So this is the kindness that's been between Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu and his mother. And we have plenty of stories regarding the mother. As I said, I've skipped, like for example, the story of that person who was cutting his mother, top of his shoulder, and he was making hajj in the heat and so on and so forth, making second, unbelieving the camera. Sees Abdullah ibn Abbas, what do you think? Do you think that I, alhamdulillah, I've given back the favors of my mother upon me? He said, not even one from her ahat, the sound that she does when she delivers you, when she pushes you. You know, she needs lots of ahs. He said, not even one of hers. You haven't really paid it back yet. Nah, tafadhal.
So is there another hadith which we could clarify here about if the mother was not there? Someone said that my khala is alive, and you do.
Your mother is different from the khala. Different from the khala. But you have to be kind to your khala, whether your mother is alive or not alive. You have to be kind, because the kindness, silatul rahim. Rahim is not to father and the mother, but it goes as well further to the sons, to the brothers, and the sisters, to the uncles, the aunts, all of them. So it goes circle by after circle, the sila. And of course, it will not be as great as the children and the father and the mother, but it will be sila. So the sila could be done as minimum as a phone call, just phone call. Assalamu alaikum, how are you? You're right, alhamdulillah, khalas, alhamdulillah. Because some of the people can't afford to travel from one side of the world to the other side of the world to go and, for example, see his mother. So his mother will be delightful. She just, hears his voice as well. She sees some money being sent to her, because she can't look after herself. Usually is the case. Now, fadal. All the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari are to be in general authentics. Not every single word. But the hadith, yes, it's authentic. But some of the wordings in the hadith, there are some criticism from scholars, not from anybody. So not just a person, he came from nowhere, he says, yeah, Bukhari, and there's an era which is taking place, I would say every century or even less than that. We have found these people, especially now with the technology, they're very quick to become famous. And becoming famous not in their knowledge, but actually in their insultation to the companions, and in their insultation to the Imam al-Bukhari, in doubting the Ummah in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, which are to be one of the sources of Islam, and to doubting the Bukhari, and then you're mentioning hadith from the Bukhari, and they say to you, how can you believe such a thing? And I'm going to give you an example. I'm not going to tell you the person's name, because I don't want you to Google him out and start listening to him. He's a person, a'udhu billah, which he himself, he has insulted Aisha, and he says from Ahl Sunnah. He's from what? Ahl Sunnah. But he's not from Ahl Sunnah. He's like a wolf dressed up in a sheep skin. He's a wolf dressed up in a sheep skin. And usually it is the case. The munafiqun are the ones, Allah Azza wa Jal, إِنَّ الْمُنَافِقِينَ فِي الدَّرْكِ الْأَسْفَلِ مِنَ النَّارِ. The munafiqun, the hypocrites, always what? At the bottom of the hellfire. So why is it they are at the bottom of the hellfire, not the kuffar? Because the kuffar, you could see them. You know that they are their enemy. But these munafiqun, they are hypocrites. They damage from the inside. And that's why they are at the bottom of the hellfire. And the more, as the scholars have said, the more powerful is Islam, the more hypocrisy you will see. Do you understand that? And the less Islam powerful, the hypocrisy will not be there. That person will say what he believes. So if the Islam is powerful, this hypocrite will start to hide. More hypocrisy. He will start to hide and pretend, yeah, I'm all good. And start, you know those people, Abdullah ibn Salul used to be like you, looking with a beard and coming, used to fight with the Muslims, used to fight in the battles, used to do everything. But they are hypocrites, kuffar. You couldn't, say what they have, their belief, because of the Islam is powerful. But now the Islam is not powerful. It's in the name of the freedom. So hypocrisy now is, they show it. They show it. They speak out with their tongues what they believe in their hearts. So one of them is this person. He talks about Sahih Bukhari, and I'm just saying this to immunize you, not to tell you go and look for it. To immunize you. For example, he brings you some hadith. He said, this, wallahi, I don't believe that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and you can't believe it. And they say Bukhari and Bukhari. And then he says, I'm from Ahl Sunnah. They accuse you, you're not from Ahl Sunnah. I am from Ahl Sunnah. And when you listen to him, definitely he is the enemy of the Sunnah. A'udhu billah. He says, this hadith, which he brings to the people in his masjid, as an Imam Khatib, by the way, he's not a scholar, he's just a person who is, his words is like, you crazy, you crazy. I can't be a scholar talking like that. So he says, Imam al-Bukhari, he was saying in his hadith, would you believe it? He's saying that, would you believe it? A person passing by the Prophet of Allah while he's delivering his khutbah. Then they are from the tribe of Az-Shanua, well-known tribe. And he said, they said to him, Messenger of Allah, when is the hour? When is the hour? Mata as-sa'a. So the Prophet ﷺ, he pointed to one of the youngest. There he said, if this person goes old, then your hour is came. Then the hour had come. Sorry. Then the hour had come. How can you believe that the Prophet ﷺ said that? That means if you believe it, that the Prophet ﷺ said the hour had taken place maybe 90 years later, which hasn't taken place. Do you understand that? And of course it's khabith. Khabith means a'udhu billah, murjan shaitan, hypocrite. He knows for a fact, and in Sahih al-Bukhari it's mentioned, this hadith has got turuq, it's got like ways of narration. It explains it in Aisha radiallahu anha wa ardah. She says that this hadith, the same hadith, narrated in a different way. She said that the Prophet ﷺ, he said to that little boy that if he becomes old, your hour will come. So what is your hour? You're dead. But he knows that, but he hid that. So they mean that people have doubts about Imam al-Bukhari and others and others and others. And they mentioned the story of the monkey, the donks and the monkey, the one, you know the story of the monkey in the Sahih Bukhari? In case you have no doubt. The story of the monkey is a story. It's one of the companions who had just embraced Islam, and he had seen something which he could never, believe what's happened. And this is Sahih Bukhari. So he's bringing it like to say, to take the mick. How can you believe such a thing? That this monkey, which is an old monkey, he had another monkey lying his head on his hand like that. It looks like a wife and husband. Okay, and then another monkey came and he sort of started tempting that other monkey, and that monkey, she lifted herself slowly from the hand of that male monkey, and she went with them, and they did male to female what they do, alright? And then their matter was found out, and I saw that the whole monkeys, they knew about it. The father woke, and then she came back to put her hand, and he woke up, that monkey, and he knew what happened. And then the whole monkeys, they got together and they put that monkey into the pit and they started stoning him. This is Sahih in Bukhari. How can you believe such things, Sahih Bukhari? How can you believe? That's Hadith Sahih. But Sahih to people who are scholars, but mentally handicapped people like this person, maybe he doesn't understand it. You know, in our sayings, in our Arab sayings, they will say, Azna min qird. Do you know what Azna min qird means? This person makes fornication more than the monkey. Because in the monkey tribe, there's fornication going on more than the other animals. This is well known. So if that happens, an incident, so he's saying, how can we now take in the rajm, the pelting from the stone from monkeys? Well, that took incident. We say that this authentic, as maybe the interpretation of that Sahabi to what he had seen, that is questionable. Do you understand me? Maybe he thought this is pelting. They don't know, maybe it's not pelting, it's to do with something. He said, I almost even wanted to pelt that monkey with them. Was done the fornication. This is the interpretation of the Sahabi, but it does not tell me to accuse the narration of Imam al-Bukhari, who had narrated with authenticity. But you could differ with what? That in Sahabi had interpreted. We have an interpretation of other, because رُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ لِمَنْ هُوَ أَوْعَ. You could have a person who is giving you some fiqh, but the person you're giving to him, he might understand more than you do. The scholar, when he looks at for example, a proof, he looks at a different angle, he might bring from that hadith hundreds of benefits. I give it to you, one benefit, two benefits, and that's it. Isn't it? True or not? So we say, Al-Imam al-Bukhari, there is no path whatsoever, no way whatsoever for anyone for those, I would say, the loonies to go and accuse the Imam al-Bukhari that he has pathetic stories or something like this. A'udhu billah. I would say that these people are hypocrites, and they are people, may Allah shall expose them to the public and to know that they are not from Ahl Sunnah. We have plenty of these people, and we have plenty of examples like this, like a Saqaf in our country, who's done exactly the same thing. He's from Ahl Sunnah, but he's not from Ahl Sunnah. Wal iyadu billah. The last minute, if you have any question, the last minute. Fadlan.
On the same line, I've seen someone in the street talking about Shaykh Al-Albani and Imam saying that, oh, Shaykh Al-Albani claims that he's better than Bukhari by making some hadith of him.
Anybody who says the Imam al-Bukhari, Imam al-Albani, he said, and who he claims himself that he is better than Imam al-Bukhari, is a liar. Take it from me. Any person who said that Imam al-Albani said or claimed that he is better than Imam al-Bukhari, he is a liar. He is a liar. He is a liar. Imam al-Albani rahimahullah, he says about the person who is less than the Imam al-Bukhari, which is Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, the one we have something, to criticize regarding his aqeedah. But in terms of hadith, he is second best after Bukhari. Imam al-Albani, he says about that person who is less than Imam al-Bukhari, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he said, التي قد عجزت الأمهات أن تلد مثله. And I heard this from his mouth. That is, the mothers are incapable of producing somebody like him. This is a person less than Imam al-Bukhari. So you're talking about himself, who is less than Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani. He said the mothers, even the mother of Shaykh al-Albani, was incapable of bringing somebody like Ibn Hajar to say that he is comparing himself to Imam al-Bukhari. If he, subhanallah, even was compared to any of the Imams, or Imam Abu Hanifa, he said, what am I? It's nothing. I don't even reach their shoe. He said that, and he said that explicitly. Explicitly. And they said as well, those Imams, when they used to take their knowledge, they take their knowledge, like for example, it was mentioned how Imam Abu Hanifa taking his knowledge from how many scholars? How many scholars around the sheikhs? Now these days, hardly we find, so many sheikhs. We ask, what is your sheikh? 10, 20. But can you count 1,080? 1,080. Can you count 1,080 scholars that you take? And you can't. Unless you're a person who is in an era of scholarship, and you yourself traveling from one person to another. Even though the technology is helping, but you could never have that number of scholars to be your teacher. And number of scholars, like for example, at the time of Ibn Taymiyyah, we had scholars who had taken from, and scholars he had produced, like Imam Ibn Qayyim, rahimahullah, al-Jawziyyah, Imam Abdul Hadi, and all these Imams are great Imams, rahimahumullah. So those people, they need to behave themselves and they stop lying about the Shaykh al-Albani, rahimahullah. أسأل الله العظيم رب العظيم أن يجعلنا من المسلمين والقبل فيتبعوا أحسنه وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين.